7 signs he's drowning in his own shadow because of you, Carl Jung. You will think of him sometimes, not because you miss him, but because his silence hums through the ether like an unfinished story. You feel it, don't you? The tension of something left unresolved, the pull of a soul resisting its own reflection. You will think of him, and he will think of you, but not with peace. No, he's haunted. You see, when a woman embodies her light, her awareness, her emotional intelligence, her unapologetic softness, she becomes the mirror in which a man confronts himself. She doesn't need to demand honesty, her very presence strips away illusion. And that's when it happens, the drowning begins. Because every man carries within him a shadow, the dark reservoir of everything he denies, his insecurities, his failures, his secret desires, his hunger for control, his fear of being seen. Most men spend their lives running from it. They wear confidence like armor and achievements like camouflage, hoping no one will see what festers beneath. But then, she arrives. A woman who is grounded in her intuition is not impressed by the mask. She senses what's underneath, the dissonance between what he projects and what he suppresses. And that silent recognition, that unspoken seeing, terrifies him. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." In her presence, he begins to feel that truth. And it shakes him to the core. He starts to project. He sees her not as she is, but as a reflection of what he cannot accept within himself. Her independence feels like rejection. Her emotional depth feels like chaos. Her boundaries feel like punishment. Every time she chooses herself, it echoes the parts of him that never learned to. This is the first sign, confusion. He begins to oscillate between desire and resentment, admiration and fear. He wants her light, but her light exposes him. And exposure to one's own shadow feels like suffocation to an unprepared soul. He tells himself she's too much. Too emotional. Too mysterious. Too demanding. But what he really means is, she makes me feel too deeply. She calls forth the parts of him he cannot control, vulnerability, empathy, surrender. And so he recoils. Then comes the second sign, distance. He retreats into silence, not out of indifference, but out of overwhelm. The very energy that once drew him close now becomes unbearable. He may even convince himself that walking away is strength. But in truth, he's drowning. He's drowning in the emotional mirror she held up to him, one that revealed not her flaws, but his own. You see, when a man is uninitiated, when he has not faced his pain, his childhood wounds, his failures, his mother complex, he will unconsciously make a woman the container for all of it. She becomes the vessel that carries both his longing and his loathing. And so, love becomes warfare. But this warfare is internal. She may never raise her voice, and still he feels attacked. Because the true enemy is not her, it's the shadow that demands to be acknowledged. This is the third sign, blame. He begins to rewrite the story. Suddenly, she is the reason for his chaos, his confusion, his restlessness. He may accuse her of manipulation, when in truth, he is the one manipulating his own perception to avoid self-confrontation. And she, the intuitive one, begins to sense the unraveling. She doesn't fight it, she observes it. Because she understands something profound, when a man hasn't met his shadow, love will always feel like threat. There's a strange paradox in this. The very woman who could have helped him heal is the one he pushes away, because her energy forces the shadow to rise. She becomes the symbol of everything he both craves and fears, intimacy and exposure, safety and surrender. This is how men drown. Not in water, but in their own refusal to look within. When he avoids his shadow, life begins to mirror it externally. Opportunities collapse. Friendships fracture. His peace evaporates. And he tells himself she cursed him, when in reality, she activated him. That activation is the alchemy of the feminine. It's not something she does intentionally, it's who she is. Her empathy disrupts his numbness. Her clarity disrupts his denial. Her self-respect disrupts his control. She becomes the storm that breaks his illusion, and he, unprepared, mistakes it for destruction. But destruction is often the beginning of awakening. When he walks away from her, he believes he's escaping chaos. But he's only running deeper into himself. Alone at night, when the noise fades and the silence returns, her energy still lingers. Not as memory, as mirror. And that mirror whispers the truth he cannot unhear: you didn't lose her. You lost yourself in her presence. And so the drowning continues. Because until he learns to breathe underwater, until he faces the depth she represented, he will meet the same shadow in every woman who follows. There is a point in every man's unraveling when he stops running from the shadow and begins to feel it closing in. Not as an external force, but as an internal ache, a suffocating pressure that whispers, you cannot hide anymore. The fourth sign emerges here: obsession. It's not love anymore, it's compulsion. He starts to replay every word she said, every glance, every silence. He convinces himself he's searching for closure, but he's really trying to reclaim the illusion of control that her presence dismantled. You see, when a woman has awakened his unconscious, she becomes the symbolic key to his lost self. The mind, desperate to avoid transformation, reinterprets that as longing for her, when in truth, it is longing for wholeness. Carl Jung described this as the projection of the anima, the inner feminine that lives within every man. When a man meets a woman who embodies what he's disowned, tenderness, emotional depth, authenticity, he doesn't recognize those qualities as his own potential. He sees them only in her, and therefore becomes addicted to her presence. But addiction is not connection. It is dependency disguised as devotion. And so, he begins to chase the ghost of her energy, scrolling through old messages, revisiting memories, constructing narratives that keep her spirit alive in his psyche. She becomes the archetype of what he cannot yet integrate, the sacred feminine, both muse and mirror. This is why he cannot let go, even when she has walked away. Because she was never just a woman to him, she was the embodiment of everything he has not yet become. The fifth sign reveals itself in anger. It's subtle at first, a flash of irritation when he sees her move on, a tightening in his chest when she appears unbothered. But beneath the surface, it's deeper. His ego cannot accept that she is free while he is trapped. Anger is the shadow's defense mechanism. It masks pain with power. It disguises grief as resentment. In truth, he's not angry at her. He's angry at the part of himself that he abandoned long ago, the part that once wanted to feel, to connect, to surrender. The tragedy is that he mistakes her independence for betrayal. He believes she left him behind, when in reality, she simply stopped carrying his unhealed weight. And she, the woman who has walked through her own darkness, knows this all too well. She understands that love cannot heal a man who refuses to meet himself. She knows that compassion without boundaries becomes self-destruction. So she chooses silence. Not as punishment, but as preservation. Because silence is the only language the shadow understands. When she withdraws her energy, his illusions begin to collapse. The validation he once drew from her attention now evaporates, and he is forced to confront the emptiness beneath. That's when the sixth sign emerges: spiritual exhaustion. He feels drained, restless, unable to find peace no matter what he does. He may seek distraction, new women, new achievements, new chaos, but nothing satisfies. Because the hunger is not for pleasure, it's for presence. Jung called this enantiodromia, the process by which any extreme inevitably turns into its opposite. The man who once sought control becomes enslaved by his own desire. The one who rejected emotion becomes consumed by it. His avoidance transforms into obsession. His silence becomes torment. And through it all, she remains the unseen catalyst, the soul who awakened his descent into shadow. It is important to understand, she did not cause his suffering. She revealed it. Her light did not create his darkness, it only illuminated what was already there. But for a man who has never been taught to face himself, this revelation feels like punishment. So he blames her, even in absence. He tells himself she ruined him, that she broke something inside. But what broke was not love, it was illusion. And breaking illusions is painful. because the ego dies screaming. Yet in this pain lies the possibility of rebirth. If he could surrender to it, if he could stop resisting the mirror she offered, he might find what every man secretly seeks, wholeness. But few do. Most retreat further into denial, mistaking numbness for peace. They drown quietly, never realizing that the water was their own reflection. And she, the awakened feminine, learns something sacred from his drowning. She learns that her light is not a gift for the unwilling. She learns that empathy without discernment becomes sacrifice. She learns that love without reciprocity is just another form of abandonment. And slowly, her compassion turns into wisdom. Because when a woman has been the mirror for another's shadow, she emerges knowing one truth above all others, that healing cannot be borrowed. It must be earned. There is a quiet moment after the storm, a stillness that descends when every illusion is shattered, and all that remains is the truth. For him, that truth feels unbearable. For her, it feels like clarity. The seventh sign begins here, fragmentation. The man who once appeared composed, articulate, even powerful, begins to lose coherence. His actions contradict his words. His pride becomes a brittle shell, cracking under the weight of everything he's repressed. He oscillates between regret and denial, wanting her to see him and fearing her gaze all the same. It is the final stage of the shadow's collapse, when the psyche begins to disintegrate under the tension of opposing forces, the desire to evolve, and the fear of death. Because to the ego, evolution is death. To face the shadow is to die to the illusion of who one thought he was. He remembers her not as a person, but as an energy. She exists in his psyche now, the anima, the symbol of soul. Her voice becomes the whisper in his conscience, her absence becomes the mirror in his solitude. And in that haunting, he realizes what Jung meant by the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But transformation demands surrender, and surrender is what he resists most. He cannot admit that she was never his to possess, only his to recognize. That her love was not a reward, but an invitation. That her presence was never meant to complete him, but to awaken him. And she, the woman who once held space for his potential, now understands the deeper alchemy of detachment. Because every woman who walks this path learns that her energy is sacred currency. The feminine is not meant to rescue the unready. Her compassion is not infinite, it is discerning. Her love is not a bandage, it is a mirror. And sometimes, the kindest thing she can do for a drowning man is to stop diving after him. So she lets go, not out of indifference, but out of wisdom. Because she knows that saving him would mean losing herself. She knows that to stay would be to sink. This is the moment where the feminine shifts from savior to sovereign. She reclaims her energy, her light, her power. And as she rises, something extraordinary happens. The shadow that once consumed him begins to lose its grip. Because the energy he once drew from her, the validation, the warmth, the reflection, is gone. And in its absence, he must either evolve or decay. This is the crucible of the masculine soul. For the first time, he faces his inner emptiness without a woman to absorb it for him. No more projection, no more distraction, no more emotional scaffolding. Just silence, and the echo of what he refused to see. In that silence, he begins to glimpse himself. Not the persona, not the charming illusion, but the wounded boy beneath, the child who learned that love must be earned, that vulnerability is weakness, that control equals safety. He begins to feel the grief of everything he's denied. And though it terrifies him, it also begins to free him. This is the paradox of the shadow. What we fear facing most is often the doorway to our liberation. For the woman, this moment marks her ascension. Because she too transforms in his absence. She learns to separate empathy from attachment, compassion from responsibility. She learns that her love does not need to be proven by endurance. She learns to walk away not in bitterness, but in grace. The feminine in her softens, but the queen in her strengthens. And as she moves forward, the energy between them begins to shift, not in words, not in gestures, but in vibration. He feels it. He senses her peace, her self-possession, her quiet radiance. And that, more than any confrontation, becomes the true mirror. Because now he understands, she was never trying to change him. She was trying to awaken him. But awakening is a solitary path. No one can walk it for another. So he stands there, somewhere between regret and revelation, realizing that the woman he thought he lost was, in truth, the woman who showed him himself. And she, somewhere out there, no longer looks back. She knows that not every connection is meant to last, some exist only to ignite transformation. And when she finally releases the last thread of energetic attachment, something sacred happens. She becomes untouchable. Not because she no longer feels, but because she no longer seeks validation from the wounded. Her peace becomes her protection. She has learned the art of divine detachment, the ability to love deeply without losing herself. And that, perhaps, is what Jung meant when he spoke of individuation, the process of becoming whole, of integrating both shadow and light, of transcending the need for external completion. Because in the end, the woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, doesn't plead, doesn't prove. She simply is. She stands as the embodiment of everything he must learn to become, conscious, grounded, sovereign. And in that realization, both are set free. The drowning ends not with rescue, but with awakening. And so, the final truth emerges, that the woman who once triggered his descent was never his punishment. She was his mirror, his teacher, his initiation. And her final act of love is to walk away. The woman who knows her worth does not chase, she chooses.